You're listening to the Ultimate Trumpet Podcast, brought to you by trumpetstudio.com. I'm Bella, and with me as always is Adam.
Hey everyone, Adam here, and today we are doing something a little different. We are going deep on gear. Specifically, we're talking about valve oil.
Valve oil. I know what some of you are thinking. Is this really a podcast episode topic? And the answer is absolutely yes. Because the marketing around valve oil is genuinely wild, the player debates get heated, and there's a ton of chemistry and real science underneath all of it that most players never hear explained clearly.
This episode comes directly out of Studio Notes number 20 over on trumpetstudio.com, written by Michael Droste, who has been playing, teaching, and maintaining trumpets for 50 years. And when someone with that much time behind the bell sits down and works through the chemistry and the manufacturer specs and the real-world experience, you pay attention.
So we're going to cover everything today. The 6 oils worth knowing, the actual chemistry of petroleum versus synthetic, what manufacturer specs really mean, how your specific instrument changes the equation, the cold temperature variable that nobody talks about enough, the residue and maintenance question, and we're going to sort the real claims from the marketing hype point by point.
And we'll land on a practical verdict at the end, specific recommendations for specific situations. Because the worst thing you can do with a topic like this is go through all the detail and then not tell people what to actually buy.
That's right. Let's get into it.
So let's set the scene. You walk into a music store, and there's the valve oil section. And if you've never really paid attention to it, you might be surprised by how many options there are. You've got your classic petroleum bottles, the ones that have been around since your teacher's teacher was playing. And then you've got these sleeker synthetic formulas that cost twice as much and come with marketing copy that sounds like it was written for a sports car.
Ultra-smooth action, nanoparticle technology, keeps valves cleaner longer. And players debate this stuff in online forums the same way audiophiles argue about whether expensive cables make their speakers sound better.
And here's what's interesting. Unlike a lot of gear debates, this one actually has real chemistry behind it. The petroleum versus synthetic distinction isn't just marketing language. It reflects a genuine difference in molecular structure and how those molecules behave under the conditions inside your valve casing.
So the debate is real, the chemistry is real, but a lot of the specific marketing claims are not. And that's exactly the kind of situation where 50 years of experience plus actual manufacturer specs becomes genuinely valuable.
Which is what this episode is built on.
Let's start with the products themselves, because you can't evaluate what's in the bottle without knowing what's actually on the market. Michael identifies 6 oils that come up repeatedly in professional circles and student conversations, and they span the full spectrum from classic petroleum all the way to modern precision synthetics.
Number 1, Alcas Fast. This is the classic. Petroleum-based, runs around $5 to $7, and has been on players' valve casings since the 1950s. The key thing to understand about Alcas is that the thinness is intentional. It is designed to be ultra-thin, which gives it very fast initial action. The trade-off is that thin oils evaporate faster and need more frequent application. Alcas is not a deficient oil. It's an oil with a specific design intent.
Number 2, Blue Juice. Also petroleum-based, slightly heavier formula, runs about $6 to $9. The interesting thing about Blue Juice that separates it from Alcas is that it includes mild cleaning agents in its formulation. That cleaning chemistry helps suspend and move residue out of the casing rather than letting it settle. And that's why a lot of players who've tried both end up sticking with Blue Juice for the long term.
Number 3, Hetman number 2. Now we're into synthetic territory. Hetman runs $14 to $18 for their valve oil, and what makes them unusual is they actually publish a viscosity-graded line. Their number 2 is specifically formulated for standard medium-bore trumpet valves. Their number 3 is for larger-bore instruments. This is lubrication engineering applied to brass instruments in a way that no petroleum oil even attempts. We'll get deeper into why that matters when we talk chemistry.
Number 4. Ultra Pure Regular. Also synthetic, runs $12 to $16, and it's built on what's called a PAO base, polyalpha olefin. We'll explain that in the chemistry section, but the short version is that PAO synthetics genuinely leave less residue in valve casings over time compared to petroleum, and UltraPure has built a strong professional reputation specifically because of how clean it keeps the valves. Michael uses this on his primary gigging horn and has for years.
Number 5. Yamaha Synthetic. $10 to $14, formulated by the manufacturer specifically to match Yamaha's valve tolerances. And this matters because Yamaha machines their valves tighter than most other brands. So when Yamaha says their synthetic is tolerance matched, that's a meaningful technical claim, not just marketing. It performs well on non-Yamaha horns too, but the tolerance-specific benefit is most relevant on their own instruments.
And number 6, Roche Thomas Premium, $8 to $12, which makes it a petroleum blend, a hybrid formula that bridges petroleum and synthetic characteristics. Better cold temperature behavior than straight petroleum, not quite the residue performance of full synthetic. It's an honest middle ground option for players who want to step up from straight petroleum without committing to the full synthetic price point.
One more thing on price before we move on. Michael makes a point that the per-ounce cost matters more than the sticker price. A synthetic bottle that stays in your casing longer between applications can actually be more economical over a full playing season than a cheaper petroleum bottle you're reapplying twice as often. Run the math before you assume cheaper is cheaper.
Okay, let's talk about what is actually in these bottles, because this is where the conversation gets interesting.
Traditional valve oils, Alkas, Blue Juice, that category, are refined petroleum products. They work by forming a thin lubricating film between the valve piston and the casing wall. The chemistry is straightforward, and it's been proven over decades. These oils have been keeping trumpets playing since before most of us were born, and there is nothing wrong with the fundamental approach.
But petroleum chemistry comes with 2 inherent limitations that are worth understanding. The first is temperature sensitivity. Petroleum oils are susceptible to viscosity changes as temperature drops. The same molecular structure that makes them effective lubricants at room temperature causes them to thicken noticeably when cold. This isn't a manufacturing deficiency. It's a fundamental property of hydrocarbon oils. It happens in motor oil, in industrial lubricants, in valve oil. If it gets cold, petroleum oil gets thicker.
The second limitation is oxidation. When petroleum residue sits in a valve casing and gets exposed to air and the mild acids in your breath condensation, it gradually breaks down into gummy byproducts over time. This is where the reputation for petroleum oils gumming up valves comes from. And that reputation is not wrong. The chemistry supports it. But there's a very important asterisk on the timeline, which we'll get to in the maintenance section.
Now synthetic oils. Modern synthetic valve oils are built on polyalpha olefin, PAO, or ester-based stocks. These are the same synthetic lubricant chemistries used in aviation engines and precision industrial machinery. The key distinction is that these are engineered molecules, not refined natural ones. And that gives the people formulating the oil precise control over viscosity, temperature stability, and oxidation resistance in a way that refining petroleum simply does not allow.
And the practical consequences are significant. Synthetic oils maintain consistent viscosity across a wide temperature range. This is not marketing. This is a fundamental documented property of PAO-based stocks. It's the reason aviation and aerospace applications moved to synthetic lubricants decades ago. The performance is predictable and stable from cold-soak conditions all the way up to operating temperature.
Synthetic oils also oxidize far more slowly than petroleum, which is why they leave dramatically less residue in valve casings over extended use. Both of these advantages, temperature stability and slower oxidation, are chemistry, not advertising. They're real, they're documented, and they're the foundation for every legitimate performance claim synthetic oils make.
And then there's the viscosity question, which is more nuanced than most players realize. Most people think about valve oil in simple terms, thin or thick. But Hetman's graded system shows that it's more precise than that. Their number 2 is spec'd for standard medium-bore trumpet valves. Their number 3 is for larger bore instruments. They're matching the oil's weight to the specific mechanical demands of the bore you're lubricating. No petroleum oil in the market does this with that level of intentionality.
One of the most useful things Michael does in Studio Notes 20 is go through what the actual manufacturer specs mean in practice, not the marketing language, but the underlying claims and whether the science behind them is legitimate.
Let's go through them. Hetman's viscosity grading system. This is legitimate lubrication engineering. The numbered line matching oil weight to bore is a real and meaningful technical approach. Whether an individual player can feel the difference between their number 2 and number 3 on their specific horn is player dependent. But the science behind it is sound.
UltraPure's PAO base claim. This means no petroleum distillates and no petroleum oxidation byproducts. The clean casing reputation that professional players talk about is chemically grounded. It's not a brand story. It reflects how PAO-based stocks actually behave over time.
Yamaha's tolerance match formulation. Yamaha machines valves to tighter tolerances than most other manufacturers. Their synthetic is specifically spec'd for those tolerances. On non-Yamaha horns, it performs well. But the tolerance-specific claim is most meaningful on their own instruments. That's not a criticism of the oil. It's context for what the spec actually describes.
Alcas's thin formula. The thinness is intentional and real, so is the faster evaporation rate. For players who want maximum initial valve speed and don't mind applying oil more frequently, it delivers exactly on its design intent. The faster evaporation is a feature for some players, not a bug.
And Blue Juice's cleaning agents. The mild cleaning chemistry in the formulation helps suspend and move residue out of the casing rather than letting it settle. This is a real formulation difference from Alcas. It's why Blue Juice has a slightly better long-term reputation despite both being petroleum-based.
Here is the factor that almost no valve oil review ever covers, and Michael flags it as one of the most important things experience teaches you. The performance gap between synthetic and petroleum oil is not the same across all instruments. It depends heavily on the precision of your valve tolerances.
Think about what's happening inside the valve casing. The valve piston is moving up and down inside the casing tube, and the lubricating oil is filling the gap between the two surfaces. On a modern precision-machined horn, a current Yamaha, a box Stradivarius, a Schilke, that gap is very small and very precise. The piston fits the casing with very tight tolerances, and the oil film has demanding, precise work to do. It needs to maintain consistent viscosity to keep the valve moving freely without seizing.
That is exactly the environment where synthetic oil's temperature stability and consistency deliver the most meaningful performance benefit. The tight tolerance means there's less mechanical forgiveness in the system. The oil has to do more precise work, and a more precisely engineered oil does that work better.
Vintage horns are a genuinely different situation. A 1960s Olds recording, a vintage King Super, a mid-century Con. These were machined to looser tolerances than modern instruments, and they've often worn further with decades of use. In a looser bore, the mechanical fit itself does more of the lubrication work. The system is more forgiving. The oil film doesn't need to be as precisely engineered because there's more mechanical slack to absorb variation.
And that explains something you actually see in the playing community. Players of vintage horns have been using Alcas and Blue Juice with excellent results for 60 years. They will continue to do so. The oil works fine on those instruments because the tolerances don't demand the precision that synthetic provides.
The practical implication is this. If someone tells you that you absolutely must switch to synthetic oil, and they don't ask what horn you're playing, they don't fully understand the question. The answer depends on the instrument. Modern tight tolerance horn? Synthetic is the better choice? Vintage looser tolerance horn? The petroleum oils that have worked for decades will continue to work.
This is the section that I think surprises a lot of players, because cold temperature performance is probably the least discussed real-world variable in the whole valve oil conversation, and it's also the one where the chemistry gives the clearest, most unambiguous answer.
Petroleum hydrocarbon oils thicken as temperature drops. This is a fundamental property of the molecular structure. It's not unique to valve oil. It's the same behavior you see in motor oil, in industrial lubricants, in any petroleum-based product. Thinner petroleum oils like Alcas thicken proportionally more in cold conditions than heavier petroleum formulas. But every petroleum oil is meaningfully affected by cold.
Synthetic PAO-based oils were specifically engineered to resist this behavior. The molecular uniformity of PAO gives it what lubrication engineers call a high viscosity index, which means viscosity stays relatively stable across a wide temperature range. That's not a marketing phrase. That's a technical property that's documented, measurable, and the primary reason aviation and aerospace applications moved to synthetic lubricants. Cold soak performance is a genuine chemistry-grounded synthetic advantage.
For trumpet players, this matters most in 3 specific situations. First, outdoor gigs in cold weather. You've played those December parades, those outdoor ceremonies in October. Your horn is in the cold, your oil is in the cold. Second, cold church sanctuaries or auditoriums in winter. Not every venue has great heating, especially in older buildings. Third, any performance where the horn sits unplayed in a cold environment before you have to perform, sitting in a cold car, backstage in an unheated space.
And here's the practical reality that Michael puts a spotlight on. If you've ever had valves that felt sluggish at a cold outdoor concert and you blamed yourself, your technique, your embouchure, something you did wrong, there's a reasonable chance the oil was a significant contributor. Petroleum oil in a cold environment thickens. Thicker oil means slower valves. It's chemistry, not the player.
Cold temperature performance is probably the single clearest case where synthetic oil provides a real, chemistry-supported performance advantage over petroleum. If you've ever had this experience and never understood why, now you know?
The claim that petroleum oils gum up valves. We've all heard it. And the answer is, it's true, under specific conditions. Understanding those conditions changes the practical recommendation considerably.
Here's the chemistry of what happens. The thin petroleum film left in your valve casings after playing gets exposed to air and to the mild acids in your breath condensation. Over weeks and months, it oxidizes, breaks down into increasingly gummy byproducts. Over time, without cleaning, this buildup becomes the sticky, sluggish valve problem that players associate with petroleum oil. The problem is real. The timeline is the critical variable.
With monthly cleaning, which you should be doing regardless of what oil you use, petroleum residue buildup is minimal and manageable. The horror stories about valves gunked solid with petroleum almost universally involve horns that went many months without proper cleaning. And in those cases, the oil isn't fully to blame. The maintenance habits are.
Synthetic oils are more forgiving of maintenance neglect because they oxidize slowly and leave less residue to begin with. So the practical framework is this. Be honest with yourself about how often you actually clean your horn. Monthly cleaner? Petroleum works fine. Twice a year cleaner? Synthetic will serve your valves significantly better. The oil choice and the maintenance frequency are connected.
And Michael makes a broader point here that's worth stating plainly. The players he's known over 50 years who had the worst valve problems were almost never the ones using the wrong oil. They were the ones who went months between cleanings, who let condensation sit in the casings, who oiled on top of old residue instead of cleaning first. The product mattered less than the habit.
The maintenance habit is the foundation. Everything else is built on top of it.
Okay, let's go through the most common marketing claims and give you a plain language verdict on each one, based on chemistry and manufacturer specs rather than advertising.
First claim, synthetic oils are significantly faster. Verdict, partially true. At room temperature, well-formulated synthetics are smooth and consistent. But the bigger practical difference shows up in cold conditions where petroleum thickens and synthetic stays consistent. At a warm summer gig, you may not notice much difference. At a cold December performance, the difference can be significant.
Second claim, petroleum gums up your valves. Verdict, overstated. True over months of neglect. Manageable with monthly cleaning. The maintenance habit matters more than the oil type in most real-world playing situations.
Third claim, synthetic lasts longer between applications. Verdict, true. Heavier synthetic formulas stay in place longer than thin petroleum oils. Less frequent oiling is a genuine practical advantage. And as we mentioned earlier, that contributes to the per-ounce value calculation when you're comparing overall cost across a playing season.
Fourth claim, cold temperature stability is better with synthetic. Verdict, true, fully grounded in lubricant chemistry. Synthetic oils were engineered specifically to resist cold temperature thickening. Petroleum oils were not. This is the clearest performance advantage synthetic holds, and it's not a close call.
Fifth claim, more expensive oil equals better oil. Verdict, not reliably. Price tracks oil type. Synthetic costs more to produce, so it costs more to buy. But within the same category, price does not reliably indicate quality. A mid-priced synthetic outperforms premium-priced petroleum for cold stability, regardless of what you paid for either bottle.
Sixth claim, nanoparticle or ultra-refined technology. Verdict, unverifiable. No independent data exists to validate these premium-tier marketing claims. The core synthetic versus petroleum distinction matters and is real. The marketing language layered on top of that within the synthetic category is largely unsubstantiated. Don't pay extra for nanoparticles.
And seventh, bore-matched viscosity, the Hetman system specifically. Verdict, worth considering. Hetman's graded viscosity approach is legitimate lubrication engineering. Whether an individual player can feel the difference between the number 2 and number 3 on their specific horn is player-dependent. But the science is sound, and it reflects a level of formulation intentionality that nothing else in the market matches.
This is the section where we stop explaining the chemistry and start making actual recommendations. Because none of the above matters if we don't land somewhere useful.
Situation 1. You play a modern precision-machined horn, and you perform in cold or variable conditions. Go synthetic. The cold temperature stability advantage is real and chemistry-grounded. Your tight-tolerance modern horn benefits most from an oil that maintains consistent viscosity, whether the gig is in a warm summer band shell or a cold December church. Hetman number 2 and Ultra Pure Regular are both excellent starting points. Try both and see which your specific horn responds to better.
Situation 2. You play a vintage horn with looser tolerances. The synthetic advantage becomes less pronounced. Players have been running Alcas and Blue Juice in vintage olds and kinghorns for 60 years without complaints. The mechanical fit of a well-maintained vintage horn is more forgiving of oil type. Use what works. clean regularly, and don't let anyone convince you that your vintage horn needs a premium synthetic formula to play well. It doesn't.
Situation 3. Budget is the primary constraint. Blue Juice is the better petroleum choice over Alcas. The mild cleaning agents in the formulation give it a slight advantage in long-term casing cleanliness, and both are legitimate oils that will keep your valves moving. The money saved over a playing season of petroleum versus synthetic is real and meaningful for a student. Put that money toward lessons or music.
And the one universal recommendation, regardless of what you use, cleaning frequency matters more than oil chemistry. A horn cleaned monthly with petroleum oil will outperform a horn cleaned twice a year with the finest synthetic available. The oil debate is real but secondary. The maintenance habit is primary. Clean your horn.
Michael closes Studio Notes 20 with something worth sharing directly because it ties the whole conversation together. He says, "I've used most of what's on the market at various points in my playing life. My current daily oil is ultra pure on my primary gigging horn, not because I ran a controlled experiment, but because over extended playing I noticed the casings staying cleaner longer, and clean casings mean consistent valves. On the vintage pieces in my collection, I still reach for Blue Juice without hesitation."
And then the real point. The players he's known who had the worst valve problems were almost never the ones using the wrong oil. They were the ones who went months between cleanings, who let condensation sit in the casings, who oiled on top of old residue instead of cleaning first. The product mattered less than the habit.
Buy good oil. More importantly, build a maintenance routine and stick to it. That's the whole conversation.
That is episode 20 of the Ultimate Trumpet Podcast. Valve oil. The chemistry, the claims, the practical verdict. All of this is based on Studio Notes number 20 over at trumpetstudio.com, which is a full written piece you can read, bookmark, and come back to whenever you're standing in that music store staring at the wall of bottles.
If you need the latest practice material, be sure to check out the Ultimate Warm-Up Book for Trumpet and the Ultimate Technical Study for Trumpet. If you're getting ready for the gigging season, don't forget your copy of the Ultimate Wedding Book for Trumpet. All three are available at trumpetstudio.com.
And if you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you'd take a moment to leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. It genuinely helps the podcast grow and reach more players, and it takes about 30 seconds. We read every single review.
Thanks for listening. From all of us at trumpetstudio.com, now go practice.